It's the Friday Morning Thumb on the Live 88.5 Morning Startup.
And Louis B. on hiatus. We do have Christopher Redmond from DearCastandCrew, an Ottawa filmmaker, critic, and blogger this morning. And a thumb up or a thumb down this morning, Christopher?
Well, hey, everyone. I'm giving my thumb up to a movie called CBGB. But in the spirit of punk, it should probably be my middle finger that's up. So this movie is all about the club, this famed club in New York called the CBGB Club.
Right.
And it follows the owner named Hildy Crystal, right, played by Alan Rickman in it. And the story, it isn't told in that same sort of saccharine style of maybe Studio 54, if you remember that one, sort of a similar theme. It's also not as gritty as, say, a movie like Sid and Nancy, which is about that time as well. Instead, it's a little more like the Michael Winterbottom film 24-Hour Party People. If you've ever seen that, which is about the Manchester scene, the punk music scene at the very same time in UK. This one, however, actually, stylistically, it's a lot more like Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Have you ever seen that?
Nice.
Yeah, so it takes the approach of looking through the point of view of Punk magazine, the actual magazine, which takes a very illustrated approach. Okay. So each scene transition actually looks like a comic book. You've got speech bubbles, you've got thought bubbles going on there, little cartoon pieces of lightning all over the place. It's a really fun, high energy picture about all these bands that went through there and how they got their start. Bands like you've got the Police, right? You've got the Ramones, you've got Patti Smith, you've got Iggy Pop, and in fact Iggy Pop is actually played by Taylor Hawkins, who is the drummer from the Foo Fighters, right?
Yeah,
so a little bit of rock and roll credibility there, and it's actually a really fun film.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like it's visually stimulating with all these extras in there.
Is Alan Rickman awesome in it?
He's really fun. Yeah, he plays really he's kind of downbeat. Like he doesn't love punk music at all. In fact, the reason it's called the CBGB is because it was named Country, Bluegrass, and Blues, and that's what he wanted to play, but he couldn't find any acts. Really? So he just the Talking Heads, for example, they just lived across the street, and they're like, "Can we play here?" And he's like, "Well, show me what you got." Yeah. And they played, and he's like, "Yeah, we could try that." And he just kind of reluctantly lets all these bands in. And he's a terrible businessman too, right? He just would give out drinks for free all the time, became this real hub. And at the very end of the movie, in the credit sequence, you actually see the Talking Heads giving their acceptance speech at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they bring up Hildy Crystal, and they kind of profusely thank him, saying, "This guy's responsible for so many of us, having a stage and a place to play." So it's a really cool story.
Neat. All right. Out of the Furnace.
Right, so this is really the only big Hollywood film that's being released this week. It stars Christian Bale and Casey Affleck, and they're playing brothers where one of them goes off to war, the Iraq War, the other one goes off to prison if something happens, and it's about them a few years later coming back and trying to reintegrate into society. Now, they both do this with varying degrees of success. Christian Bale's a little more noble in his efforts, his character anyway, and Casey Affleck's character gets into this underground fighting ring that's ran by Woody Harrelson and William Dafoe. And just these terribly sadistic characters. It's a really dark, kind of gritty movie, but a really big cast. Great characters. You have Forrest Whitaker in it, the beautiful Zoe Saldana playing a love interest. And it's kind of got this murder mystery thing that happens about halfway through, and it's about them trying to, come to terms not only with their past and the society today, but it takes place very specifically in 2008. So kind of like Killing Them Softly, you remember me saying, characters are sitting in bars a lot watching Obama's speech and this hope and change, these promises, and it kind of, it's got this weird ring to it where you feel like they don't really believe it, and I don't know, maybe that's what they do in the U.S. All these films, people just kind of sit around in bars. Even in CBGB, they're listening to Nixon's speech, "I'm not a crook." I guess that's what people do in the U.S. They just sit in bars and watch politicians talk. I don't know.
It's the documentary portion of the film.
Yeah.
All right. What about Empire of Dirt?
Yeah, so, Out of the Furnace is a really solid drama, but my recommendation to people, you're in Ottawa, go see a good Canadian film called Empire of Dirt. This is about 3 generations of Aboriginal women who are sort of trying to reconcile their past. But what's extra interesting about this is the women, the grandma here, is about 38 years old. So, her daughter, she had a kid when she was about 16. Yeah, and then her daughter also had a kid when she was about 16. So it's a very different dynamic between these women when they get together. The youngest here is about 13 years old, and it's about them talking. And, if there's one thing Canadian filmmakers do exceptionally well, it's coming-of-age stories. And this really qualifies for that, even though, it kind of focuses on the middle woman, so the mother, who's about 27. Right. She's had sort of this stunted growth because she had a kid so young. And so it really is this nice coming-of-age story and how these 3 women sort of get along. And it's a really nice film to go see this summer.
There is so
just
much in that. Yeah, as a 38-year-old grandmother, that is an angle I don't think I've ever even heard of as a premise for a movie.
And they address it really well. So these women talk, and they're like, all these things are kind of going through my head. I'm thinking, like, she doesn't look like a grandma. And sure enough, one of the characters, you don't look like a grandma. She's like, well, thank you. And then, you don't look like a mom. And so they address all that stuff. And they could come across as sisters, and that's what makes it a really different type of film.
Exactly.
It's interesting.
Okay. Empire of Dirt and Out of the Furnace, and the thumb up for CBGB from Christopher Redmond from DearCastandCrew. Thanks for coming in this morning.
No problem. Thanks.
Appreciate it. It's 8:16, the morning startup on Live 88.5.
Ottawa traffic on Live 88.5.
This traffic update is for Ottawa.